Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today. So I don't do a lot of interviews on this channel. It's usually just me talking to the camera about various topics. However, there's somebody named Hayley Honeyman, and I follow her on social media, and she does a lot of content about autism and ADHD. So actually, I heard that she was coming into my city to do a photo shoot, and I thought it might be the perfect opportunity to snag her for an interview. So I'm really excited about this interview. Hayley is such a warm, inviting person to talk to. I had lots of questions for her. So without further ado, here's the interview. So yeah, why don't you say a little bit about yourself, like what you like to think about or what you like to do?
Yeah, a little bit about me. I mean, my full-time work that I do is content creation about ADHD, autism, and then I actually run programs for specifically adults with ADHD or low to medium support needs, autistic adults, because there's like no support out there for adults with autism. So that was a hole I was trying to fill, and like affordable care, because that's not really available either. So that's kind of what I do full time, and yeah, I came up to do a shoot, and I'm excited to do it and excited to chat and excited to be here.
You identify, I guess, with ADHD and autism, or?
I do, yeah. I always say that I'm an ADHD presenting autistic person, meaning it is much more obvious that I'm ADHD than it is that I'm autistic. Whereas I have like a friend who is an autistic presenting ADHD person. Much more obvious that she's autistic, but also has ADHD. So yeah, it's more obvious that I'm ADHD than I am autistic, I think.
Okay, and so, like in your own words, like what does that mean to you? Like what does that look like?
Yeah, for me, I was diagnosed with combined ADHD, which means that I am both inattentive and also hyperactive. And so for myself, I am very hyperactive. Like I am moving all the time, but a lot of that hyperactivity can exist in my brain too. I'm also extroverted, so it's kind of hard to like know what is ADHD versus what is just being an extroverted person. But yeah, I'm just a lot of thoughts all the time, a lot of ideas, a lot of goals, just like moving very, very quickly. And then in terms of my autism, I kind of like say that if you didn't know me personally, you probably wouldn't know that I was autistic, because a lot of my autistic challenges, I have strategies and tools for now, so most people wouldn't notice it. And yeah, a lot of those things I learned over years and years and years to hide them. So got very good at pretending I wasn't autistic before I even knew that I was. So that's kind of what it, I guess, looks like for me.
How would you describe autism? Like, I guess you've been diagnosed with both?
So ADHD, I got formally diagnosed when I was 21. Autism, I got in with my doctor and discussed it. I did some testing with him, did some testing with my psychiatrist as well, and they both were like, we believe that you have autism. Do you want to now go on to the diagnosis process? And it was about 3-year wait. And I realized that for myself, there's not really a benefit to me getting fully diagnosed because I don't necessarily gain anything from that. And I feel like I'd be holding up space for people that need it more than I do. So I didn't go through the entire process. But I got confirmation from my doctor and my psychiatrist that are both like, we think this is what's going on. So autism for me, being a low supports needs person, meaning I can live alone, I own a business, I work for myself, like I can function completely fine by myself. I don't have any speech challenges. My autism and how I look at it is that it is a challenge in terms of overstimulation is a really big one. It's challenges in terms of sensory issues, so like textures, foods, anything like that. And then having like autistic shutdowns sometimes when like the world feels like too much, just like completely shutting down and getting overloaded. And yeah, so that's what my autism feels like. But it's so massive, like autism, the term. The spectrum is so huge. So yeah, when we think of like a spectrum, a lot of people think of like a line, like here's the start, here's the finish. But really it's a circle. And people just exist in different areas of the circle. And yeah, so I'm just a lower support needs person, which doesn't mean I don't need support, but I need a lot less than I think a lot of autistic people.
So the sensory part of things, like what does that look like for you?
Mainly for me, it's food is a really big challenge. Like there are certain textures of food that I just won't touch. Like fish, I hate so much.
And the texture, not the taste, or?
The texture, not the taste. Like, I love the smell of fish, but the texture I just cannot deal with. Different textures of clothing really bother me. Like, all of my clothes, none of them will have tags or anything in them because, like, that is awful for me. Yeah, a lot of materials really bother me. A lot of sounds really bother me. So, like, being in a large crowd, like, I went to trivia the other night. Earplugs were in the entire time, and I had my noise-canceling headphones just in case, because if I'm in a loud room for too long, I'm done. Like, I'm shutting down completely, can't talk anymore, can't communicate, can't be in the space, can't be productive, can't have fun. So, yeah, the main ones for me are textures of food and materials, and then sound is a really big one.
So would you consider yourself like an introverted person or an extroverted person?
Definitely extroverted. Love people. Love it so much. But my ability to be around people varies based on my autism.
See, I think that actually is quite interesting, because I think this is my wondering anyway. Yeah. If sometimes people that are extremely introverted start to wonder maybe if they have autism, just because maybe they don't relate to people as well as, like, you know, super extroverted people. Mm-hmm. And it almost starts to look a little bit like autism sometimes, right? Yeah. But an extroverted person with autism, I think, is one of the more interesting cases.
Yeah.
Because you like to be around people. And I guess, so with that, like, do you find it easy to interact with people, or is it hard to read people? Like, I know that with autism, they say, like, nonverbal cues and things like that are difficult, or?
Extraordinarily. I, like, throughout my life, especially in high school, I was an overachiever. I did everything. I knew everyone. I wasn't necessarily friends with people, though. I had maybe 2, like, really close friends, but everybody else I found really hard to, like, connect with. And later in life, learning that I was autistic, I'm now able to go back and look at my life and think, I was bullied by people, and I didn't know, because I couldn't pick up on cues of people being passive aggressive or sarcastic, or, like, making small rude comments that I thought, like, oh, they're making a joke because people are laughing, so I must be like, haha, this is a joke. Oh, I'm the butt of the joke. And now I'm realizing that. So I didn't notice for a really long time that I was bad with social cues, because I was very, like, just go with the flow. And because I didn't really find out that I was autistic until I was 22. And so for a really long time, I learned how to mask and just, you know, if someone's doing this thing, I'm going to mirror them in the exact same way, because that's what makes people like you, is doing the thing that other people are doing. So that was a really big coping mechanism, was just mirror people and hope that that works. But that also meant then that, like, I wasn't really understanding the social cues, and I wasn't becoming myself. I was becoming a mirror image of every person that I was around.
And so with the sarcasm, is that something you still struggle with?
I'm so much better at it now. I definitely get it now. I think that I can be sarcastic now too, but it was harder in high school to read it in other people. Now that I, like, understand what it is, I can do it. But it's like a conscious choice that I'm going to be sarcastic. It's not like I just said this thing and it happened to be sarcastic.
And so, okay, so I haven't really talked much about it, but one of my kids actually was diagnosed with autism when at quite a young age, mm-hmm. and also struggles with sarcasm. And the thing is that I'm actually a very sarcastic person, and so I'm always, I say so much sarcastic stuff. It's been a bit of a thing I've been trying to instill, like, what is sarcasm? Because mm-hmm. I've noticed that's sort of a missing piece. And I've always kind of wondered about that. It's like, what is sarcasm? I've wondered. It's sort of like something that's it's something that's ridiculous, right? Or it's over the top. And then there's an identification that that's ridiculous, so it must be a joke. Like, yeah. I guess I've been curious, like, about, like, what is that what is it about sarcasm that's difficult, I guess?
I think it's the tone and, like, missing that, because I will take anything someone says to me at face value completely. And so if someone says to me, like, yeah, that's a great shirt, Hayley, but they don't mean it, I'll go, thanks. It is a great shirt. I love this shirt. But it was the tone that I completely missed of, like, that's a nice shirt. Now I recognize it because I understand that a little better. But just, like,
I see. And in that case, it's not a ridiculous thing to say you like
Right.
or somebody likes your shirt. But for some reason, they're picking up that it's not nice.
Yeah.
And they think it's obvious.
And see, that was a piece of bullying that I had all my life, was people would just say like little things that are like, no, I'm being sarcastic. It's not actually. But yeah, a lot of the times I think sarcasm can be really small and it's not like super ridiculous stuff. So it's believable, which makes it a lot harder then to understand if someone's actually being serious or not.
So you tell me if I'm correct. This is because I've spent a lot of time researching autism. I've read a lot about it. I've watched so many videos. And to be honest, I still feel like I can't grasp it sometimes. And I wonder sometimes, I watch these videos and I see people saying things that maybe they claim are autism. Maybe there's this thing inside and then it almost like presents through their personality. So I've tried to figure this out, like what is the core of it? And this is what I wonder. You tell me if I'm accurate. It sort of seems like autism it's like the difference between what you intuitively know and what you have to almost learn, right? So somebody, like a baby, just looks you in the eyes. Like one of my kids just looked me in the eyes. My other child didn't. And so there's a learning to do that. Yeah. It's like, look at me, right? Look at me before you talk at me. Or you're just talking to a wall. No, look at me first, right? So there's a learning that happened, and the other one, it was completely intuitive. And so that thing seems like with sarcasm, it's like some people just intuitively know what that is. Other people, it's almost like they have to learn it. What do you think about that?
I think that that's very accurate. And yeah, I think in a lot of ways, I mean, if we want to get to like definition of autism, you would find in the DSM-5, which is like a very clear, here are everything that you need to have to be diagnosed with autism. But a lot of people are challenging the DSM-5 and saying that it's not as simple as just saying you have to have these exact things, because those exact things present completely differently in a ton of different people. And I think you're right in terms of like a lot of autistic people, myself included, do not intuitively grasp the fact that making eye contact is respectful and that is expected of a person, and that you don't just say everything that's on your mind 24/7, because not all of those things are appropriate in social forms. That was something I struggled a lot with, was just, my Oma would knit me a pair of socks. I'm like, Oma, these socks suck and I hate these and they feel awful and I don't want to wear them. And she's, that's the rudest thing you've ever said to me, and get mad. And I'm like, oh, interesting. Okay, well, I don't know what you want me to do about this. And then the next time you say it again. And then at a certain point, though, I think the big difference in terms of support needs for autism is that a higher support needs autistic person will likely not be able to have that learning stage. But a lower support needs person like myself, I talk a lot about masking as something. I learned over a number of years that the way that I am naturally is not the way people want me to be. The saying everything that's on your mind is not socially acceptable, and people get mad at you and get upset with you. And so it's like, oh, if I want people to like me, I can't do what's intuitive to me. And so I think that might be the difference, is the intuitiveness of an autistic person is not how we see like socially acceptable behavior.
So one of my questions about that is, if you gave somebody some socks and they said that, would you think, oh, that person, like it doesn't reflect back on you? Because I guess that to me is more of it's like putting yourself in other people's shoes thing. Yeah. And that's why I wonder, well, would you just appreciate it if somebody said, I hate these socks? Or would you want them to like it? Or you don't care? Or
it's such a good question. And I have always said my entire life that I want people to be 100% honest with me, even if it hurts my feelings. Like, I absolutely value to my core if I were to give someone something and they go, I actually really don't like this. And I go, oh, thank God you told me, because now I can go get you something that you are going to like, or I can understand you better. Because I think a big challenge with, especially someone like me with lower support needs autism, is that I want to understand people. That's like, and I felt for a long time that I didn't. And I was just kind of guessing and hoping. And so if someone were to be really bluntly honest with me, best thing in the world, which is why like my closest friends now, my closest friend is autistic because I know everything she tells me is the truth. Everything she tells me is exactly what she's thinking. And it feels so much better knowing that.
And see, like this right here is one of those things where I'm like, see, that to me sounds better.
I 100% agree because like as kids, when you're opening gifts in front of your family or something, you're taught to say thank you, no matter what it is. Even if you don't like it, even if it's not something that you enjoy, you're told like you have to be grateful, you have to be appreciative. That's what's respectful. And it's like, well, but I don't like it. This isn't something I enjoy. Wouldn't they rather know that so that the next time they get me something, it's something I'm actually going to use or that they're going to understand me more? No. Say thank you, be grateful, end it at that. We learn so young. But I totally agree that every relationship I have now, people know that I'm point blank. I'll tell you exactly what I think. And I tell people to do the same. And it just curates such strong relationships. And like just knowing that if, you know, a friend, if they're going to cancel on me last minute, instead of saying like, oh, I forgot, I can't come anymore, that's going to hurt my feelings. I'm like, you forgot about me? That sucks. But if they're honest and say, honestly, I had a horrible day at work and I just don't want to be around people right now. That's so much better because that's not about me. Great. But I always found that challenge with friendships of people being like, I'm going to be nice and lie in this situation because maybe it'll be better. But then really it hurts you. So I value the honesty. And I think that's a big portion of autism.
Because like I think for myself, I also value honesty and I want to know if somebody doesn't like something because then I can change for the future, right? If somebody hates this restaurant, well, I don't want to go there. Like I want to go somewhere where you want to go. I also know what people want to hear. Right. So I struggle. This is one of my greatest struggles. Something I've talked about a lot on my channel is like this people-pleasing tendency. I know what people want to hear, but I want to be honest. So then I'm stuck between these two things. You know, what do I do? How do I deliver this news in order to be authentic and honest? This extra bluntness, is that just an evolution of that? Or is there something wrong?
It's a good point because I think the piece that's missing is just the inherent social cues or the social expectations we've built into our culture of say you like tell someone you like the restaurant even if you don't, because if you don't like the restaurant, that's rude. They've got all this effort, they've booked this reservation, you've showed up. Like it'd be nice to tell them you enjoyed it even if you didn't. Those are all like, we expect that in our society, but realistically, like I don't think that's a great way to live. And I don't think that's a bad thing, to be honest and blunt, but society has told us it is.
And then I wonder too if it's sort of an ego in the other person, an ego-driven thing. It's like, I'm giving you this gift, you better like it, right? Is that just ego?
It's tough though, because I talk a lot on my channel about masking, going so long, you know, oh, I'm not likable the way that I am because I don't fit into society's expectations, so I have to pretend and be different ways. The masking creates that ego a little bit. That masking kind of builds in the like, okay, I have to do all of these things everybody else is doing, even though it doesn't serve me. So I also have those moments that you're kind of explaining where there's that people-pleasing tendency, but I call it my masking tendency of, well, now I have to guess what other people want or what they are thinking, even though my immediate reaction is to say, I hate this restaurant, I never want to come back here. But there is that piece of me now that's like, well, if I want to be liked, if I want people to enjoy my company, I've been told that I have to do these things. I have to say, oh, this is a great restaurant, I loved this. So I battle with it too, but it's only because of this mask that's been created to try to fit in, to have friends, to like be accepted, because you're just told for so long that you can't be accepted exactly as you are, which is the worst.
And so do you think that results in some extra anxiety after the fact? So what I've noticed with this family member that's been diagnosed is that she worries on like a much greater level. Like I'm always helping her through these interactions. And then she's like, what did this person mean when they said this? And what did this person said this? What did that mean? Are they upset at me? Are they mad at me? And this is a very frequent thing. And then I am sort of playing this kind of counselor role as we walk through these social situations. And I kind of explain, well, no, that person didn't mean that. But it's an intense anxiety, I would say. But some of the things are quite, to me, they're like over the top ridiculous. Yeah. It's like, does she hate me now?
Right.
And I'm like, well, did she give you any indication that she hates you?
Yeah.
Like, what did she do? What did she say? Like, what was her body language? And to me, there's zero. Like, there's zero indication that she hates. So I say, well, does she just have like extreme social anxiety, or is this something related to the autism?
Right.
Is
yeah.
Questions.
I think that's really relatable to a lot of autistic people. And I totally struggle with that as well. And I think that comes from this core place of like, I can't trust people to be authentic with me, because even though my innate reality is to be blunt and honest and that way with people, it's not a lot of people's innate way of being. And so as an autistic person, we kind of have this pressure of like, figure out everybody, try to get deep into what they're actually saying, because maybe what they're saying is not actually what they mean. And it causes just this deep sense of anxiety of like, well, I don't get if they were being sarcastic. I don't get body cues. I don't get if they were hinting at something and I completely missed it. And so I'm going to spend a lot of time now thinking, well, what did I miss? Did this happen? Did this happen? Did this not happen? And that anxiety after a social interaction, I totally relate to it. It's very, very frequent. And I think a lot of people that I work with also talk about it, like spiraling after a conversation because they feel as though like, oh, that person definitely hates me now. Emotional dysregulation is also something very common in autistic people, where the amygdala and the cerebral cortex have a poor connection between one another, which just means that you have greater emotional reactions to things. Also another reason that women are not frequently diagnosed as autistic, because they can be really emotional, and it's like, oh, autism you would think is like numbness or like a monotone and lack of emotion, but in women it can often present as like hyper emotional, hyper reactive, and being very like, this social situation didn't go exactly as I thought it was going to go, thus it must have gone bad. Or I even say, I've talked about this on my channel too, if an interaction wasn't obviously positive and it was neutral, I'm going to assume it was bad. And so I totally relate to that of like, this must not have gone well if it wasn't super obvious that it went well.
And so did you have language delay?
Not at all. No, like I was even early, I would say. I was a talker just immediately. It's so interesting. I always say that if you've met an autistic person, it doesn't necessarily mean you've met like autism, because it's so vastly different. Like I can interact with an autistic person that has such high support needs, and we can still though relate on certain things, even though it's like you have lived a completely different life than I have lived living on this area of the spectrum.
And the sensory thing I think is really, because do I love loud sounds like suddenly? No.
Right.
But I do know there's a difference, because when one of my kids was in kindergarten, like that was a big deal.
Right.
To get ready for kindergarten.
Yeah.
Literally, on fire drill days, we had to take her and put her outside before the fire drill, because she would like, that was terrifying. Like it wasn't just, oh, that's a little scary. Oh no. Oh, I hate this sound. It was like meltdown. Yeah. Crying, scared, like the world must be ending, kind of fear.
Right.
And so that's when I realized that like a sensory problem isn't just oh, this annoys me, because everybody might be annoyed by a fire bell, but like, are you able to actually exist in this with this fire bell going off? Most kids can, right? Right,
totally. Yeah, and I think, the challenge for me, like I didn't get diagnosed for so long because I was able to hide it really easily, but man, like when you say fire drill days, immediately I'm like, oh, those were the worst days ever. Like I hated those days. And I would choose not to speak for a lot of that day then. We don't necessarily say like go nonverbal, because I had the choice to speak, but I would just not speak for the rest of the day because I was like, that was it. That was all of my energy went into just existing in that space with that loud noise, which like most people wouldn't relate to that.
And now she's fine.
Yeah.
She can exist in that place, but still, right? You can see it in her eyes, and then she regulates herself.
Right.
So that's why I feel like what I said earlier was it's almost like it's a learned thing versus an intuitive thing. It's not intuitive for her to exist with fire bells.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess, but she's learned how to. So as you were talking there, it sort of sounded like the hyperactivity component was coming in, right? When you were a kid. So then immediately I'm going, what's the autism? What's the ADHD? How are these two things related? I was curious to hear what you thought. How are they related, and like, is there overlap or?
It is hard to identify between the two, especially when you've lived an entire life. Like for 22 years of my life, I lived not knowing that I had either. And so distinguishing what is a challenge there. They are very separate disorders and like things to live with. But I don't know the exact numbers, but it's very much like if you have ADHD, you're more likely to be autistic. If you're autistic, you're more likely to have ADHD. And for me, how I figured out that I had autism was that I got diagnosed with ADHD. Spent an entire year hyperfixating on ADHD and getting like really focused on it and being like, hey, I'm going to learn everything there's to learn about ADHD. I'm going to become an expert at it. I'm going to learn how to live my life the best way possible. And I did that in a year, but I still had all of these major challenges. And I was like, how is that possible? Like, I've learned everything there's to learn. I've done everything anyone has ever suggested. And so when I went to my doctor and he was like, I think there's a possibility you're autistic. And I'm like, holy shit. Like, this explains all of those other pieces, all of the challenges that I've had socially in my life, all of the challenges I had with sensory issues and overstimulation and like just existing in certain spaces. And it was just like this aha moment for me of like, that was the missing piece. And it made sense though that my ADHD was found first because, like I said, very ADHD presenting person. Like, I think it was kind of crazy to me that I didn't get diagnosed with ADHD because I am the bouncing off the wall, like do everything all the time, overachiever, which a lot of women with ADHD, that's how they present. And yeah, so the autism got completely missed. But yeah, it was tough because the ADHD explained so much of my life, but there were like the really big challenges of I would just melt down where after spending a weekend doing things with people, like just having social outings, which I love. I loved social outings, so I would do this a lot. The Monday would come around and I would be like, I can't look at lights right now. I can't hear things right now. Like I need to turn all the lights off, not talk for an entire day. I need to shut down. And that was the autism. But I completely had no idea because I was only diagnosed with ADHD. So yeah, for me, it was like this missing link that I figured out.
So what would you say, like, what are your main struggles, I guess, with ADHD? Like, how does that mainly present for you? Like, what are the
thing is like Hayley today doesn't struggle with ADHD very much because I have so many tools, accommodations, and I understand it so deeply. But prior to having those things, the main things I struggled with was like, I get bored so quickly. I couldn't hold a job for more than a year because I was like, I'm bored. I need to do something else. I constantly had new ideas that I wanted to just go and do, and it would lead to me being really rash. I was an overspender for years and years and years, and that's something I'm still working on. But I impulsively buy things. I'm a person that I can't have alcohol in my house by myself because I'm impulsive, and if I need dopamine all of a sudden, I'll go to substances. Like it would be a bad place for me. Thankfully, I've never had challenges with that, but I know that about myself. So I'm like, I'm not going to keep that in the house. Going to stay away from it. But it's that impulsivity and like rashness to just get dopamine into my life that for a long time was a huge challenge for me. And it actually caused me to be extremely depressed for so long because it felt like the only ways I could get dopamine was social media. And so scrolling for hours and hours and hours on end. And yeah, so that was ADHD for me for a long time. Now the struggles that I have with ADHD is just a lack of organization. Like the ability to just take everything that's going on in here and put it on paper is really hard. So I have an assistant now, which is great because we have brain dump calls where I'm able to go, blah, here is everything. And she goes, great, let me organize these into things that you can actually do something about it, which is like the best thing in the world. So yeah, I don't really struggle with it anymore. I would say the autism is something I still definitely struggle with, but ADHD, I feel like I've got pretty nailed down now. Mm-hmm.
And so this dopamine, I listened to that Andrew Huberman episode about ADHD.
Yeah.
And that was sort of his thought, maybe that what it really means is that you just have a lower baseline dopamine.
Right.
And so they seek out behaviors that would give them more dopamine. And so what would you say? Like you said, substances.
Yeah.
Like what about like coffee? Like what do you think about that? Do you drink coffee or?
I don't anymore. But.
Or I guess he said in a different thing that coffee or caffeine doesn't actually raise your dopamine. It just makes the receptors more receptive to it, I guess, which I thought was interesting, whereas a lot of other drugs actually increase your dopamine.
Yeah, there are a lot of really positive ways to get dopamine, but they're all requiring effort, which is why a lot of ADHDers are more likely to have addiction challenges. And so, yeah, ADHDers are dopamine deficient people. They just exist with less, and so they need to seek it out in different ways. And so, like, the best thing I ever did for my life was start training and doing physical activity because it's the easiest way to get dopamine, like the most amount of dopamine into your system. So starting your day with like a walk, which I do now every day with my dog, immediately sets me up to be like, my dopamine's at a level now that is normal. I can actually be productive in my day. Whereas when I was younger and I was in a corporate job, I would wake up and I would just feel awful for the entire day. And maybe then when I got home, I'm like, I should drink or I should smoke or I should do something because I've just felt like shit the whole day. So yeah, that would be why. So
I have not been diagnosed with ADHD, but it does sure seem like I have that. My partner, Lexi, she was the one that basically diagnosed me with it. Mm-hmm. And I started to know after I actually did some videos on it and talked a little bit about it. And what I started to notice, a lot of my friends seem to have ADHD, and a lot of them are quite successful. Yeah. And they all run businesses or even like big corporations. Yeah. And it does seem like, what do you think about this thought that kind of seems like ADHD makes you, it's like less employable, but more likely to start something and be quite successful, like on your own.
Right.
What do you think? Does that, I guess of all the ADHD people you know, is that more true or?
It's so interesting because there is like a spectrum of ADHD as well. And a lot of CEOs are ADHD because you're able to just do so many things at once. And I think that the difference can be like for myself, I tried to fit in the corporate world. I tried to fit in regular jobs and I just didn't fit in them. And so when I finally at a certain point was like, I just need to do my own thing and start doing that. And it was as though I like unleashed this ability to like really be myself and like all of my ADHD symptoms actually became a benefit to me rather than something holding me back. And I hate when people say ADHD is a superpower because it's not. It can be really debilitating. But when you manage your ADHD, when it's well managed, accommodated, and like taken care of, I think it absolutely can be, which is why I think there are so many people that are ADHD and have businesses of their own or are CEOs or are like super successful because they've just they understand their brain and they know how to work with it rather than against it, which is what I think a lot of ADHD people do though, is try to work against it to like fit a mold that they don't fit in. So it's both ends. There's not a lot of ADHDers right in the middle. It's either like super successful because you're working with your brain or trying to fit a mold that you don't fit in. And so you're perpetually burnt out, struggling, not able to get out of that cycle.
Yes, that makes sense. I actually have employees as well that do, because my main business is running like online e-commerce businesses, and I have an intense problem with doing admin related stuff. Like
Me too.
bookkeeping, I just can't do it.
Yeah.
People are like, oh, you just don't want to do it? No, it's like, no, I can't physically do it sometimes.
Yeah.
And so I hire people to do that.
Yep.
And I watch them do it. and they just, like, my current employee, she is so efficient. It's amazing to watch. But then, I'll just go and do other things that I'm efficient at. So it does seem that way. That you're really good at certain things and maybe terrible at others.
I think it's absolutely true. I so relate to that. I do not do the bookkeeping. That's like, I want to offload everything I'm bad at and everything I'm good at have the space for.
So I guess maybe as a final question.
Okay.
Maybe this is sort of going back to what I asked before, but how do you differentiate between all these different things? My thought is that it seems like people have a core personality. I know other people that say, no, you don't. You're like a blank slate when you're born, and then you become whatever based on your upbringing. But I kind of have this feeling like we kind of have a little bit of something that we're born with. And then you've got your upbringing, and you've got things like attachment theory, and all these different personality disorders, and then you've got autism and ADHD, and then there's also just the human condition.
Yeah.
So in general, how do you differentiate between all these things? Or if that's even a question, or maybe that's what all these things are. They're just like models to try to figure it out, and then over time we kind of update our understanding. Or
I think, maybe I have a controversial opinion on this. I think it's not always necessary to differentiate and really understand the root of it. I think that can actually be a really big problem for a lot of people, is well, what's the root? How do I get there? What is causing this? What's the problem here? And they spend more time on that than just understanding what is the need you need in that moment? What is the thing you're actually needing to accommodate or help yourself with? And so a lot of the times now, if I'm having a challenge of some sort, I won't sit down and go, where is this coming from? This is autism, and then deal with it. A lot of times I'll go, okay, what am I feeling? What is the issue that's showing up for me? Oh, it's sadness. I feel sad right now for some reason. Okay, how do I accommodate sadness? I need some touch. I need physical touch from my partner. Okay, I'm going to do that. Maybe it was rooted in my autism, but maybe it was rooted in being socially anxious in the time, or maybe it was rooted in my attachment style, and it could have been a plethora of things. And I like to say to people, you don't need to be diagnosed to treat yourself better, and to seek accommodations, and to seek things that are going to support you, because a diagnosis is a privilege, and a lot of people don't get that. And so I don't necessarily think there's always a benefit to differentiating. I think sometimes it's just learning how to understand your own needs and then how to support those needs, if that makes sense.
No, that's a really good point. It's actually something I need to remind myself. It's what is the point of understanding some of these things? Mm-hmm. And the point is just give yourself some tools, basically. Yeah. So it's to recognize a blind spot so that you can help yourself come towards the middle. Mm-hmm. That seems to be right.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of people are kind of on one end of something. And it's how do you get back to middle? Anyway, thanks so much for joining me today. I think you're just a great example for people that, here's a person with ADHD and autism, and you're doing really well, and you have this vibrant personality, and you're fun to be around. And I think that's just really encouraging for people. So
thank you
thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Unless you have any other final thoughts.
No, I have no thoughts left. I put them all out into this, so okay. It's just empty now.
Okay. All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you.